Recording in progress.
Oh, you're calling it. Yes.
I'm the only one here right now.
You're not.
We gotta get.
Can you hear us, Alessandra?
Yes, I can.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Nice.
Oh. Yes.
I know, my ones at work, they go to whoever's face is talking, and it's like so freaky.
For Square Anywhere Council meetings, and I'm running the Zoom, and the microphone is speaking right next to me, so it's always thinks that I'm speaking, and it's like zoomed in on my face. Just kind of duck out there.
Oh, you'll be all right.
Hey, how's it going? Hunter. Yeah, hey guys.
Hey.
It's weird.
So weird. I know. I know. I like really feel like I'm breaking some rules, even though I was explicitly told to go here. It's like all dark.
The worker prepping for tomorrow kind of makes it feel a little bit funny.
You're like,
We did prop the sign door. If you want next time, we'll always have that.
Oh, okay, I forgot the
I
sign.
don't know if he signs, but
didn't know about this.
No, I did the same thing the first time.
But I
Oh, yeah.
sorry, it's been like 90% sure where that like,
Oh,
but I guess we leave it.
Yeah, whatever. I'm not taking you. I'm doing things. You do computer science and you do IT, you know? Thank you so much, I appreciate that. See if it works. I think so.
new buildings, all the outlets work.
For a little while at least.
Exactly.
This is a really nice space though.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm chairing from virtually today. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, which is the best city in the world. Somerville is a close second, obviously. So just bear with me if I don't see one of you wanting to speak, just like wave at me more so than usual. We are not quite at quorum. I think we're missing 2 people. So unless 2 other people join, we may not be able to vote today, which is fine. But we can still have our discussions. So let's just get started with some, well, actually, before I go into roll call, who is our acting secretary for tonight?
I am Brenda.
Thank you, Brenda. And you're a regular secretary, so thank you for doing double duty. Okay, Ted Alexander, I know he cannot be here tonight. Ginny Alverson. Let's see, Ginny. Caroline Bodiger. Meredith Brown.
Here.
Laura Evans. Let's see, Laura. Christopher Ferry. Okay. Preston Gutelius.
Here.
Satoko Hirai, I know she cannot make it either. Brenda Marvin.
Here, sorry.
Okay.
I was like, I know I'm here.
We all know you're here. Steve Mulder. Barbara Myers.
Here.
Bianca Norkunis is not coming, I know. Vishor Pamplona.
Here.
Zach Rosenberg.
Here.
Alessandra Sider, myself. Rob Stanzel, I don't see. And Carol Vugaras, I also do not see. For our ex officio, Willem Baugh, I do not believe is here. Kate White.
Here.
And Justin Schreiber.
Here.
Awesome. Thanks for being here tonight, everybody. I see that we have, oh good, Laura joined. Thank you for being here, Laura. I see we have a few guests, both in person and online. So online folks, I'll move to you second. Oh good, Christopher is here too. Yay, now we can vote on things. Fantastic. So I'm gonna ask the in-person folks to introduce themselves first, and then we'll move to online. I think I just see Mackenzie and Joel tonight for guests. Is that right, in person?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Unless you guys want to say hi. I mean, you're here all the time, so I feel like we don't necessarily need you to say hi. Awesome. And then for folks online, I am going to call on you one at a time. You'll see a little pop-up window on your screen that says that I'm asking you to talk, and it'll allow you to unmute yourself. So when you see that pop up, please just say your name, your ward in Somerville if you know it, and a little bit about why you're here tonight, like if there's a particular agenda item that you're interested in. So I'm just going to start with the first person listed on my screen, which is Art.
Hi, actually, I'm Thalia, and I live in Davis Square. Let's see, Ward 6, I believe, and I'm just really interested in the topic. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. All right, next I am going to go to Logan, who I suspect I know who this is.
Hi, I'm Logan. I'm a Somerville resident. I'm not sure what ward. Just here out of interest in the topic.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Logan. Next, I'm going to go to Melissa from the MBTA.
Hi all. Melissa Goulet. I'm the Senior Director of Service Planning for the MBTA. I'm joined by one of my colleagues, well, actually 2 of my colleagues, to talk about the 90 later. And also I happen to be a Somerville resident right near Highland Ave. And so 88 and 90 are my jams. Ward 5.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, Melissa.
Right on.
And I will go to one of your colleagues, Miles, next. And we'll hear more from both of you very soon, of course.
Hi, I'm Miles Taylor. I'm the service planner for Charlestown Garage, which runs Route 90. So I'll be presenting about that tonight.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, Miles. And then finally, the last person, You'll have to correct me on pronunciation of your name. It's either Tara or Tara, so please let me know which one it is.
Hi, Tara is both is fine, but usually they call me Tara. Hi everyone, I'm Tara Kamal Ahmadi. I'm also working with Miles and Melissa. I'm the service planner and happy to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. I think those are all of our guests, and now we're at quorum, so we can move on to our main agenda items for the night. First, does anybody have? Yes.
Would you mind if we do the service changes first? Because I know Miles and Melissa have to head out.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Can we just vote on the April draft minutes really quickly? I'm going to take that as a yes. Does anybody have a problem with the April draft minutes? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Yes, let us talk about the changes to Route 90 first. Does one of you need to be made a panelist to be able to share your screen?
Doing that now.
Yeah, we just made the panelists.
Thank you.
Yes, I am a panelist. Give me just a sec. Okay, sorry for the sorry for the bizarre lighting here. Okay, should I go for it?
Go forth, Miles.
Okay. So I need to send a request to share.
We just accepted that, Miles.
All right. There we go. Okay. And I'm curious actually if I do a presentation here. I wonder if I can, well, it's not a huge deal. All right. Okay, so thanks everyone for having us to present about the Route 90 changes in East Somerville. I guess getting right into it, right now, Route 90 uses Broadway and Cross Street, and in the outbound direction, Tough Street, to get between Assembly, Sullivan, and Davis Square. It's also another connection that's making is East Somerville Station, which the outbound route is using Tough Street to get to the East Somerville Green Line station, be able to serve that in both directions. However, under the Somerville Bicycle Network Plan, Tough Street is slated for conversion to a neighborway facility, which by its nature, it'll make the street safer, it'll make it very narrow, it'll be, you know, more easy to walk and bike along, but as a result of that, it won't be compatible with bus and large vehicle operation. Additionally, we have received quite a few complaints from operations about running buses down Cross Street. The Cross Street is also very narrow. There's a lot of illegal parking that happens at school times. Drivers have many stories about getting stuck on Cross Street. So in light of the Tough Street changes, we are proposing to reroute the 90 onto Washington Street instead. We attended a community open house at the Glen Park Playground last July to discuss this change. So the idea would be, rather than serving Cross Street and Broadway, the route would go straight down Washington Street over to Sullivan and then up to Assembly. So to give a closer look at what these changes would look like, hopefully you can see my cursor. We have a map here showing here's the closed service on Cross Street. We have a future Route 85 as part of bus network redesign, which would, starting in the fall, be going up McGrath Boulevard, McGrath Highway, excuse me. Once McGrath Highway becomes McGrath Boulevard, we'll be able to install stops that can serve pretty close to the Cross Street corridor. And then along Broadway, we have routes 89 and 101. And on Washington Street, we have the proposed Route 90. And in the final bus network redesign form, it'll be combined with Route 88. to form one route along Highland Ave that connects over to Sullivan and Assembly, along with Route 109. So you can see the total ridership. It's a little bit, staggered by direction. So about 55 riders between McGrath Highway and Sullivan today. So using these cross street stops and using these Broadway stops, about 55 inbound towards Sullivan and Assembly, and about 102 outbound heading towards Davis. We've looked, and most riders will be within half a mile of the new Washington Street stops. Folks who are at or near Broadway can still use routes 89 and 101 to connect to the new Route 90 at Sullivan. And taking a look at the various schools along Cross Street, they all remain within a quarter of a mile of bus service. The Capuano School in particular will be quite close to the new Washington Street stops. East Somerville and the relocated Winter Hill School at Edgerly will be closer to Broadway, definitely doable from Washington Street, but closer to Broadway, and especially with Winter Hill, that's where most of the students are commuting from anyway. But the big important thing about this change is really the connection to the Green Line. Without being able to use Tough Street, outbound Route 90 buses would be unable to connect to the Green Line, which today happens at McGrath Highway at Alston Street. By going on to Washington Street, buses would be able to use the new floating bus stops that have been recently built for better access to East Somerville. And that's better access than today even. So these new stops, they narrow the street. They allow for calmer traffic, so it's easier to cross Washington Street at that spot. And this will be especially important in the future bus network redesign when routes 88 and 90 are combined into one route. So with that change, folks coming from Highland Ave going to the Green Line, the bus wouldn't go to Leechmere anymore. It would run over to Sullivan, but on Washington Street, people would still be able to connect to the Green Line at East Somerville Station. This future route would run every 20 minutes or better for most of the day, 7 days a week, which is a better frequency than today's 88 and a much better frequency than today's 90, which is often as infrequent as every, less than hourly. So it would be a big improvement in terms of frequency. And in the evenings, there would be some 30-minute service. So I think that's the general overview of what we're proposing to begin in the summer. So with that, happy to take any feedback and questions. We also have an email address if you want to give us feedback that way. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Miles. I realize that we don't have, we're a little behind on the agenda already. So I'm gonna just extend probably about 5 minutes, just so we have enough time for discussion. Can we start just really quickly going back to slide 4, Miles? So just to clarify, these changes to the 90 will essentially be interim until the bus network redesign changes are implemented, which will change Route 90 completely to just use Washington Street, along with the new 109. Is that correct?
The Route 90 in this area will be pretty much identical between the summer and bus network redesign. The big change in bus network redesign is combining it with the 88. So it'll be extended up to Clarendon Hill on the outbound end, and there won't be any more service down McGrath Highway to Leechmere. But Route 90 will still, in the summer, it will come down Highland, down McGrath, over on Washington, and that will stay the same in bus network redesign.
Okay, thank you. Christopher, go ahead.
Just on the same slide, just first off, just a small thing. There are other schools that aren't marked on there. PHA, Prospect Hill Academy, has a campus in that same area that's closer to Broadway, and maybe the only one that's outside of that quarter-mile radius. Just in the future, when you're doing schools, if you can take a look at both parochial, private, and charters. Charters are publics too. And I guess that riffing off of what Alexandria said, this change would be happening now before that 85 is doing service to the new McGrath Boulevard, and we don't know how long we're gonna have to wait for that McGrath Boulevard. So I guess it's still there's a bit of a hill between Washington Street and some of those and Cross Street, as I remember it. So that's I can see where some of the people are complaining about student commutes, having done that both as a with a child and with just for work, taking the 90 in the past. So yeah, I don't know. I don't remember the 90 going down Tough Street back when I used to take it. They used to take a very hard right turn right onto McGrath. I guess they're doing Tufts now to get down to East Somerville. That was changed. When was that?
That was after the Green Line extension opened. So you're correct. That was only implemented in the last 18 months or 2 years or so.
Okay.
I'd have to, but that was added so that we'd have two directions because we passed the stop on McGrath at Alston on the old 90 in one direction, but in the other direction, when you're going direct from Cross right, hard right onto McGrath that you're talking about, you're not anywhere close to East Somerville.
Okay. Thank you. I missed that because I changed my commute to be on the Green Line. Thank you.
I was just wondering, when is Tufts Street supposed to be converted into a neighborway?
Would you like the city to speak to that?
Oh, pardon me?
If we can speak to that.
Oh, sure, yes, that'd be
so,
great.
Tufts Street's redesign construction is going to begin later this year. So it's like complete construction is probably going to be November 2026.
Got it.
But that's the final construction. So construction is going to begin later this year.
I was just wondering because of the reasoning of moving, yeah, perfect. Cool.
I have a couple of questions / comments. I guess one question is the stop at School Street on Highland seems at least as close. I mean, I haven't measured it, but it seems at least as close to Gilman as Alston Street does to the actual entrance to the Green Line. It's a pretty significant walk even from there. So is that not considered a transfer point?
No, that's a great observation. They're physically close as the crow flies, but we can't have that as an accessible connection between the Green Line and a bus route because there's like a 4-story grade difference between those two locations. We need a 6% grade, which you can get between Washington Street and East Somerville. The new ramp that we have that goes from Washington Street up to the platform is less than a 6% grade. But if you're walking along School Street, it exceeds 6%. So unless we're putting in a funicular or something, it's very unlikely that there would be a way to make that an accessible connection. But absolutely good observation.
And I guess the other comment is really more comment is I'm a member of the Winter Hill School community, and I've heard a lot of just a lot of disappointment and a lot of concern from families. There are a few factors there. I think one is that not everybody is sort of as close to the 89 sort of part. There's a number of families sort of more in the Highland area, and I think obviously the McGrath situation is a barrier for a lot of reasons, and it's one of the points that I'm forgetting now that I was going to make. But I think it's a school community that's had a lot of challenges and doesn't have a ton of options. So just wanted to share that. I've gotten a number of emails personally where people have been oh, so this is on the PTAC agenda and I see your name on PTAC. Is this you? And so there is a lot of concern about sort of losing options. I recognize as a 90 rider, I know that Cross Street is very challenging, and I've been on that bus when it's kind of stuck in traffic, but I think the traffic situation is only going to get worse if we take away options for the families that need to get 1,000 kids to that 2-block radius every day. So.
And Meredith, if I could quickly jump in, I think it would be really helpful if those families would be willing to email both the MBTA and mobility just with their concerns. It's better to have something on the books than nothing. So just a plug.
I'll put that plug in. I remember the other thing I was going to say too is that there was a recent change to the 89 to add more buses overall, but it resulted in a key school commute bus being dropped from the schedule. I know there was a letter about this recently that the school committee and the city council signed on to. But that was like a really like load-bearing bus for a number of families in the community that I think has really also left big gaps. I think like sort of taking into account like the changes to the 89 fast followed by this situation, I think just like the net effect of it has been really sort of deflating.
Yeah, and we are looking into the 89 for the fall, making sure we can try to get a trip in when that old one was. Yeah.
If I could just comment on that super quick, the 89 changes, we had been updating the run times. We have GPS on the buses that tell us, how long it takes to get from point A to point B to point C. And we update our schedules every now and then to have the trips be as kind of reliable and accurate as possible. In that process of updating, as is often the case, congestion has generally been getting worse. So it took extra time. So it meant that some trips shifted a little earlier and some shifted a little later. Overall, service is still about, I think, every 20 minutes at that time of morning. I was trying to see if I could find the schedule card, but it did mean that like it wasn't at that kind of sweet spot, that perfect time that got you like right to school at the right time. It meant that it was either just a little bit earlier than kids wanted or just a little bit later. So anyway, we're looking to see what options we have for the fall schedules, just because of the time required for us to implement new schedules. They're kind of locked in from now until August 24th. The operators are already picking their work, but we are having our meeting where we evaluate any proposed changes for the fall rating coming up. So this is something that we're aware of. We got a copy of that letter from the school committee and from the city council and are aware of this issue.
Okay, thank you.
In the interest of time, I am going to say that we should move on to our next agenda items, but Melissa and Miles and Tara, thank you so much for being here and presenting on these changes. Super helpful to know what's coming down the pipes. So appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, moving on to subcommittee updates. How do you want to do this? I think that probably reviewing our draft comment letter on McGrath is not actually going to take 25 minutes. So I think that we can just take the full time allocated for subcommittee updates. I believe that design review did not meet. Is that right, Vitor?
Correct.
Okay. So then it was just community events. It was community events, and then we had our ad hoc working group meeting with, well, it wasn't with Sergeant McCary, but around the municipal road safety grant. Would someone else from community events like to give a little update on our previous or our recent activities? No one? All right, well then you're just gonna have to keep listening to me for a little bit. So we did a lot in community events over the past few weeks. We held our walk audit of Union Square, which was great. We had 60 members of the community, including 2 elected officials. Preston and Ted and Barbara did an amazing job co-leading folks around 3 routes in Union Square, along with some members of the Somerville Alliance for Safe Streets. And we got a lot of really amazing feedback from everybody that I have so far consolidated into a big spreadsheet. And the next step is to synthesize that all into a comment letter to send. So we'll update folks once we have that ready. We also tabled at the Bay State Bike Month kickoff at Aeronaut in early May, which was a lot of fun. And then we met last week to debrief the walk audit, talk about how we might want to incorporate them into our kind of slate of activities in the future. And we're also planning for Carnival on June 1st. We'll be tabling with mobility. If folks would like to join us, it's going to be, like I said, Sunday, June 1st from 2 to 6 p.m. on Broadway in East Somerville. Everybody is welcome to come help out at the table. I believe so far we have me, Barbara, Preston, and Ted, but if you want to help table, please come along. And just email us and let us know that you're interested. And then just a quick update on the ad hoc working group meeting that we had around the municipal road safety grant. We had invited Sergeant McCary from the Somerville Police Department, but at the last minute, he ended up not being able to make it. So Ted, Preston, Barbara, and I discussed last year's grant, and we put together recommendations for this year's application. Just to quickly summarize what we recommended, we recommended that they continue to use the grant to prioritize enforcing against dangerous driving behavior over cyclist behavior, and voice support for making sure that officers kind of knew how to recognize an acceptable Idaho stop, including when it's on the pedestrian phase. We also expressed interest in issuing paid tickets rather than warning citations for dangerous driving behavior. We recommended ensuring or changing the educational materials that the SPD hands out as part of the grant, so that they don't like blame vulnerable road users for their own any crashes or any conflicts that may occur, and instead prioritize how pedestrians and cyclists might get help, like by calling 311 for infrastructure improvements or reporting a crash. And then we also recommended that they purchase a speed notification sign for the community path to encourage cyclists to slow down at key locations, like right in front of the Gilman Square T station. We got a response back that did not seem to indicate enthusiasm for our recommendations. So we've kind of pivoted away from like debating the particulars of the grant. And instead we have invited Sergeant McCary and some of his colleagues to come on a walk with us to just see how we experience the city as pedestrians. TBD if they take us up on the request, but that is kind of where our advocacy stands as of now. Any questions on any of that or comments? Okay, awesome. Moving on to wow, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk so much tonight, you guys. Our next agenda item is to review our draft comment letter on the latest design for McGrath Boulevard. Kate, would you mind clicking on the draft letter link in the agenda? Just so I can walk through it with everybody. So just to quickly summarize kind of what's in the letter, I don't think much of it will come as a surprise to folks since we discussed it all at last month's meeting. But it basically starts out by thanking the project team for the work that they've been doing, talking about like how transformational, oh, thank you, Christopher. It was frustrating. Anyhow, the letter starts by thanking the project team for the really transformative project, and then also taking a really collaborative approach to the designs and really integrating community feedback into their approach to McGrath. If you scroll down a little bit, Kate, then it goes into kind of, I think, 4 areas for improvement that we're basically framing as like, we like the design, the updated design at large, but we still think that there are a few areas that could be improved upon. The first is encouraging them to adopt a 25-mile-per-hour design and target speed. So not just like setting the speed limit at 25 miles per hour, but designing to ensure that cars are going to go 25 miles an hour instead of encouraging them to go like 50 miles an hour, including through reducing the lane width, ideally to 10 feet wide, but then leaving 2 lanes at 11 feet wide so that a future McGrath could accommodate bus service, and the MBTA needs 11 foot width to run bus service, but 2 of the lanes at least could be narrowed to 10 feet. The second point is to, keep the median at 10 feet wide, but only at intersections, and to narrow the rest of the median to a single concrete strip. So recognizing that the 10-foot median is really helpful as a pedestrian refuge, but the rest of like the landscape wide median is just not providing useful shade or really any usable space to pedestrians or cyclists. So we want to see that allocated on the sides of the road. Third point is around Otis Street, and here there are a few subpoints. I got contacted by some folks on the Gilman Square Neighborhood Council who are really active on this project as well, and they are particularly concerned about the Otis Street intersection. So we have their support for these changes. But one is to adopt a 20 miles per hour design and target speed in contrast to the 25 mile per hour design speed for the rest of the corridor, designating it basically as a safety zone. Making sure that the red, yellow, green signal be on recall 24/7 so that it always cycles to a pedestrian phase. It doesn't like turn off at some point in the day, but that also there is an immediate pedestrian phase if someone requests it to minimize people who try to cross off cycle. We really want them to revisit the possibility of a raised crosswalk or intersection at Otis Street because of the successes we've seen with that infrastructure in the rest of Somerville. And then finally, urging them to consider the intersection at Broadway, which is the next closest major intersection to the north of Otis Street, considering that kind of in conjunction with Otis Street so that cars first kind of get the message that McGrath is being designed for people rather than for cars at Broadway rather than at Otis Street, which is a very vulnerable crossing. And then if you scroll down a little bit, Kate. Yes, then just, acknowledging that a lot of families still continue to have concerns about the safety of the crossing. I didn't hear from the last meeting that we wanted to advocate for maintaining the pedestrian overpass, but just kind of underscoring that like the continued concern among families underscores the need for these additional safety improvements, including the ones that we've advocated for. And then the last point, or sorry, this is not the last point, I'm sorry. We are advocating to continue wanting the MBTA to run bus service along the entire length of McGrath, including with dedicated bus lanes. And then regardless of the bus lane situation, we want amenities to be installed at every bus stop on McGrath, including shelters, benches, trash cans, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, the last point is, this is kind of a small scale point, but it was brought up by our neighbors in Gilman Square, which is that the designs include a fence along the entire length of Dana Street, which is kind of that small side street next to McGrath near Otis Street. And their assessment was that felt like an unnecessary thing that like continued the partition of their neighborhood, which felt incongruous with kind of the goal of the McGrath project to like knit back together the community. So kind of a small scale change, but still something that the neighbors thought would be a impactful improvement. Yeah. That is the draft of the letter. What do folks think? Do folks like it? Do folks hate it? Do folks think that it should be changed?
I like it. I think it's great.
Yeah, I also like it.
Yes. Logan, do you need me to unmute you? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I also like it. About the pedestrian overpass, the concerns I had seen, or like chatter of people who live in the area was more about like it being removed before some sort of other adequate alternative was in place. Not like it being removed as like a final issue. Like the timing of the removal versus putting in some other way to cross safely is also critical, not just the final state.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. That what we also, well, I included a point about that in the section on Otis Street, just kind of a continued request that the pedestrian overpass be maintained throughout construction, because you're totally right, that has been a point of advocacy since the beginning. Any other thoughts? All right, fantastic. Then I am going to move that we approve this letter and send it to, oh, sorry, Christopher, did you want to say something? You're unmuted.
Oh, I was just unmuting in anticipation of saying aye.
Fantastic. Yes, that we send it to all of the people who are CC'd at the bottom of this letter, which is the project team, the mayor, all city council members, and our state level elected officials. Do I have a second?
I'll second since I was out there way early.
Fair enough. Let you have it.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, fantastic. Thank you, guys. I will get that sent to everybody probably tomorrow. Also just recognizing, Preston and Barbara, your concerns around buses from our last agenda item. Preston, you're wondering if it would be possible to add a stop on the new 85 bus before the full McGrath rebuild. And Barbara, I'm very concerned about the further disruptions for the Winter Hill and East Somerville school students. I would encourage you guys to submit those comments to the MBTA and to and to mobility, just so they have them on file would be really useful. Yes, Eiley, I would love to send a copy of the letter. Can you give me their emails? If you just email here, I'll put it in the chat, Somerville, PTAC@gmail.com. Thank you. All right, next agenda item. We are reviewing, wow, we're way ahead of time too. This is great. We can have a longer discussion. I'm going to kick it over to mobility now, and we are going to talk about the Western Pearl Street concept design. So just as a reminder, we last discussed this project last November when we reviewed 3 possible design directions for Western Pearl Street, which is actually quite close to McGrath. So we're kind of staying in that area of the city for this meeting. But now mobility is ready to talk to us about kind of what direction they actually took based on community feedback. So I'm going to kick it over to Kate and Justin.
All right, so we're talking about Western Pearl Street, and we actually just had an open house on Tuesday. We hoped to have that a little before this meeting. It was pushed a week because of potential rain. And
I thought it was very convenient, but I can do this.
no, it's fine. It's fine. So just a reminder, this is our currently under design streets project. So the annual resurfacing program, projects like Tough Street, or like West Broadway, or like College Street. This is the city's sort of annual project to upgrade the street. These are the project limits from McGrath, so we're still McGrath adjacent, all the way to Gilman Square. If you attended these meetings before, you'll notice we extended that. To be clear, yes, we're including the intersection of Bedford Street. We have clarity on that. You'll see more detail in a minute. This is a slide about what is included. So we're completely reconstructing the street. So it's not a major utility work. So there are some limitations in terms of grades and things like that. We're not rebuilding the street from the soil, but we are repaving it, resetting all the curbs, building new curb ramps, new sidewalks, trees. We can do intersection improvements, traffic calming, crosswalk improvements. We were looking at the traffic signals to see if there's something that can be done there. Bike facilities, bus stop changes, almost everything. And then Under consideration, parking changes is there because we have proposed parking areas tonight, but not proposed parking regulations. So we still want to hear input about how to regulate them. And then traffic calming in nearby streets, we can do speed humps in the neighborhood around the project. We're trying to do that because the contractors in the area, and there's some ease to do that as well. So no substantial utility work or street lighting. You'll see we are not proposing the network redesign tonight, and green stormwater infrastructure. It's kind of under substantial utility work, but that's not part of this project either. So we had a kickoff meeting last fall. We had a couple months of our sort of initial outreach phase. Since then, we've gone dark as we've worked to get a consultant on board and take everything we heard and create a 25% design. So now we're in our next phase of outreach. At the end of June, we'll take everything we heard and then create the next version. We'll have a 80% design outreach phase in early fall, and then finish the design and bid out the projects early next year. Construction could be in 2026 and or 2027. Should be complete by the end of 2027 as well.
So I'll just focus on some of the things that we heard last fall that kind of helped shape the concept design options that we're talking through tonight. If you're interested in really digging into this, we have more details in the May 13th open house posters, as well as one of our lengthy, again, pre-concept design community engagement feedback reports. We really just want to see everything that we heard. We really wanted to put it out there so that folks saw kind of the reasons for certain design elements of the intersections, as well as why we went in the direction we did for the concept options. So I'll focus on specifically the intersections this evening, because again, there was a lot of comments we heard from PTAC following the community walk last fall, too, about these issues. At Pearl Street and Medford Street, a lot of folks told us about we reduced the frequent speeding in the area, increase the stop sign compliance, describing how Pearl Street kind of felt a little bit slippery rather than like a stop controlled crosswalk. Create safe crossing across Bedford Street. We included a photo where we kind of saw so many people want to cross at this location and there's not an accessible crosswalk. And low visibility also for people driving, just really making it unsafe for all users. We also have some requests for additional features like flashing crosswalk sign or a traffic light. Then moving east at Pearl Street and Marshall Street, many people told us they're concerned about vehicles not yielding to pedestrians in the crossing across Pearl Street. They're so focused on getting through the street that they're not paying attention to people trying to either cross the Starma. We also heard a lot of high school students use that crosswalk going up that hill to high school. We also heard concerns about motor vehicles kind of sitting on the crosswalk across Marshall Street to be able to kind of see better past the building. And so a lot of people felt like that crosswalk was often blocked because people were paying more attention to oncoming motor vehicles rather than people trying to cross. So again, requests for safety improvements like raised crosswalks or RFBs, and lots of visibility concerns. The other intersection we heard a lot about was Pearl Street and Walnut Street. This was a little bit more about moving the crossings closer to the desired path. We tried to show a photo. I probably didn't do the best job, so I cropped it a little bit, but a lot of the crosswalks at Walnut, as you already know, the community walk are quite set back, and people really can maybe move closer to where people really want to cross. Considering, or folks asked us to consider a raised intersection. People described to us their concern about aggressive driving behavior at this location and lots of red light running. And then I know this was discussed in the community walk, so I want to highlight some feedback we got here that some people, primarily parents, told us they like having the traffic signal here. They feel more comfortable having their children cross the signalized crosswalk. So that's just some highlights of the intersection feedback that we received. I also want to focus a little bit on the concept design, or sorry, the options for design directions that we provided. So as you might recall, there were 3 options that we shared last fall. The first was to have protected bike lanes in both directions, but due to the width of the street, that would require having no curb access or kind of flex, what we call the flex space or flex zone. It allowed us to consider curb extensions, tree bump outs. But it would maintain 2-way motor vehicle traffic. Option 2 was to have one direction of motor vehicle traffic, and then have your parking / bus zone to allow for curb extensions and tree bump outs and curb access and two-way protected bike lanes. The third option was to consider one direction of protected bike lane and maintain some parking or flex zone so we could have some of those expanded pedestrian facilities and support for trees. So we put it all out there, kind of the advantages and drawbacks of the different options and asked folks to share their feedback. Very high level, we heard support, concerns, and questions for each option. In the survey, we had slightly more preference for option 3, and I'll describe in more detail in a moment. And in direct outreach, we would tended to hear more support for option 3, but also advocacy for option 1. Digging into some of those highlights, we wanted to break down a little bit about what were the reasonings for the different options. I'll actually first describe the survey chart. It might be a little hard to read, my apologies for the font size. We had about 22 people say they preferred option 1, 25%, 22% preferred option 2, and 29% preferred option 3. And some folks are still really wanting to find more information. The thing that was quite exciting too is that a lot of people shared preferences, but then asked, can we consider these other elements? In option 1, some folks said they picked it because it was fulfilling the commitment in the bicycle network plan and Safe Streets Ordinance. It provided bike facilities that ease some of the demand on the community path, which is very high demand, and especially given folks biking quite fast. And it could connect to future McGrath Boulevard lanes. Some folks described how they didn't want to prioritize parking over safety. And then they shared their concern about one-way in the street or removing the option to close Bedford Street Bridge. Option 2, and you can hear that from some of the PTAC members, support for one-way in the street to reduce motor vehicle volume. Pearl Street on average kind of see about 4,000 vehicles a day. Being able to have both protected bike lanes and flexible space for curb extensions, the bigger bus stops, and parking and greenery. Support for making the street feel more like a residential street rather than a road that is frequently a huge connector. For option 3 reasons, we are concerned about no pullover space for deliveries and ride shares, and that potentially could encourage people who are driving to park on protected bike lanes or block traffic. Some folks described how they were satisfied with the existing Gilman Square Neighborway bike connection to travel under McGrath Highway, so they were more interested in strengthening that connection. There's a desire to focus on pedestrian improvements with curb extensions and creating more space for plant life. There's a request to maintain parking options for residents, home healthcare workers, which was kind of a lot of feedback we heard from Pearl Street Park residents, the senior housing located at Pearl Street and Bedford Street, and deliveries. And a wish to maintain two-way motor vehicle travel to not impede access to homes and emergency services. Some folks were a little concerned that they would always be forced to take McGrath Highway to be able to access their home if they're driving. And then requests for more traffic calming nearby streets like Marshall Street to increase safety and support bike connectivity. So those are just some highlights. If anyone's really interested, we do encourage folks to kind of dig into, it was really nuanced feedback and people really kind of talked through. There were a lot of people, and you might have experienced this when if you attended the outreach events, a lot of people who identified as bikers and talked about how they liked the quieter connections and didn't feel that this was as critical, but then some people who also identified as bikers who said, no, I think this is a critical connection, I want to. So, and then a lot of people who just talked about weighing the benefits and the drawbacks. And but we heard just kind of more leaning towards pedestrian safety. So if you're interested, please check it out. We really just wanted to share all of that with anyone who's interested. So then, wanted to then describe how do we make the decision. We did not hear a clear consensus or outcry about any of the options. And so we really just tried to focus on what do we feel is the safest decision. Over the past couple of years, we've been able to learn more from other projects where we've removed all parking. And there are definitely safety drawbacks. And so as we still kind of evaluate and kind of look at those types of projects, we did feel in this case that we wanted to eliminate option 1 because we really felt like no curb access in the street creates significant safety issues. Regarding one-way in the street, there are many one-ways currently in the neighborhood, and we were concerned about residents and service providers being able to access homes, and as I mentioned, without being forced onto the McGrath Highway. And we also want to meet our goals of improving the experience for all local road users, people walking, rowing, and biking. So in option 3, we can achieve better pedestrian experience and maintain bicycle circulation options using nearby streets. So we move forward with a variation of option 3 and option 1, creating 2 concept designs because we love to keep it not simple for you all. So that includes segments of protected bike lanes in one direction and in 2 directions and parking options. And happy to answer any questions on that. We really want to be clear kind of like how we made that decision.
So is the final, you combined, you took some parts of option 1, you took some parts of option 3? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and-
okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to walk through the 2 concepts. Big picture. So this is for both concepts. You know, there's definitely a lot of improved intersections and crosswalks with curb extensions and raised crosswalks across every single side street, and then across Pearl Street itself at non-signalized locations. We're improving the bus stops, even though bus network redesign has the 80 truncated to Davis Square. The MBTA has not given us a timeline for that, and they said please maintain bus stops here. Many of them we've made as sort of the in-lane stop or a floating stop. It is infrastructure that may not be useful for the bus in the future, but actually takes up less space along the street, so it lets us, you know, keep more curbside access in other places. And there are ways we can reuse that space in the future if the bus goes away. We have 1 continuous direction of protected bike lane, and there are some areas of 2 directions. We're using nearby streets to provide a safe 2-way connection. In the first meeting, we talked about Medford Street onto McGrath Highway. We have 2 options we think are better to show. That became a little more complicated than we initially thought. And the 2 concepts here are really come from bike lane in one direction on one side of the street, bike lane in the other direction on the other side of the street. Parking is always opposite the bike lane. There's really not enough space to move next to each other. There's some intersected variation, but that's the big difference between the 2 concepts. And we did not really get feedback on that in the first round. We didn't really hear a lot of that. We didn't really ask people to sort of tease that out for us. And then there's one side of street parking that's similar to existing conditions. And we'll be ensuring folks do not park too close to intersections or crosswalks. I'm going to just talk about this one briefly. We can go back if we want to get in more detail. Since this is biking, we're at the Pedestrian Transit Committee, but this is an overview of the 2 bike circulation options. So starting with concept 1 on the left, it's a 2-way facility on one side of the street from Medford to Skilton. The eastbound direction continues all the way to McGrath. And then for coming back westbound, we're using a very short section of McGrath where there's a bike facility, Aldridge Street, and then the existing Gilman Street neighborway, Gilman, Ed Leathers Park, back up Skilton Street. So this is a little bit in response to some folks at the meeting saying, I really like the neighborway. Could you, at the very least, get me 2-way to Skilton? And it would be sort of an extension of that neighborway up to McGrath. Also, McGrath will be improved in the future, so we think that little piece, which is not ideal to be on McGrath, could be improved as well. It's relatively flat. There's some statistics here side by side about crossings and all that stuff. The other route is a little bit different. This one has in red on the top continuous westbound all the way from McGrath to Medford. And then the eastbound direction goes up Medford Street, uses the path crossing, takes a block of the community path, takes a block of Walnut Street where there's that 2-way protected bike lane today. Then it hooks up Gilman, and then it goes up Jasper Street. That last section of Pearl would have 1 on each side of the street. So there's a couple more crossings, there's a couple more hills. It uses all like streets, so we don't have the park connection, which I know is not ideal today. So it's another option, and there's some side-by-side comparison. Happy to stop or come back, but I think we should get into the concept, and if we have time to talk about this a little more. So I'm just going to walk through, there's 3 segments here. Medford Street to Skilton Avenue, that's the existing satellite. And then this is concept 1. So starting with the intersection of Medford and Pearl, this is a layout that's very similar to the Gilman Square streetscape design. Doesn't propose to close Medford Street with a bridge, but it's a similar curve layout. We've sort of bent Medford Street into Pearl, and we've connected Pearl coming down. Medford, the other block of Medford into Pearl. There are raised crosswalk across Medford Street, that the Medford coming from the high school area, that's the stop control intersection. The Pearl Medford combination intersection, that's like a continuous, there's no stop control there. There's a raised crosswalk, so all the way on the left, right to that temporary green space. And then I guess the big difference there from the Gilman Square design, that had like a big raised sort of area all the way from there. That raised crosswalk is all the way across Medford Street. We've heard from this committee actually a number of times about like some concern over big raised areas and some preference for like separate raised crosswalks. That also would put one big raised area really close to another big raised area at Marshall Street where we're showing like a full raised intersection. That's not brick in the middle, that would be like a paint design with thermoplastic. You can see on the bottom of the street, the two-way bike facility on one side of the street. And raised crossing across the side streets. What else do I want to point out? The bus stop is in lane. There's no bump out for that because of the two-way facility. It's right on where the curve is today. And then concept 2, and I'm happy to flip back and forth. So this is more of just like a traditional teeing off of Pearl to Medford. Doesn't really change the intersection, the traffic control in Medford, but squares off the intersection where there's that really, really shallow angle stop sign at the piano building there. It does create like that large bump out. I do want to note that that line coming down next to the building, like everything to the right of that is a curb cut. So it's a very large looking bump out, but about half of it is a part of what would be a driveway. There's again separate raised crosswalks. Responding to some of the feedback we heard, also because we're coming down the hill from the bridge, you can get a better raised crosswalk if we keep it as far away from the hill as possible. When you're coming sort of down a hill and trying to go up at the same time, it's tough to get a nice traffic calm for that raised crosswalk. At Marshall, separate raised crosswalks. The full raised intersection would be like really, really close to Medford, so we're showing separate raised crosswalks. You can see the bike lane and the parking are flipped. Bike lane is on the north side, heading west, heading towards Medford. Parking is those orange areas on the bottom, and that's heading eastbound. In-lane bus stops on both sides of the street. Sorry, not in-lane bus stops. Heading east, in-lane bus stop. West, we don't have enough room for a floating bus stop there, so that is a bus stop shared with the bike facility. Happy to keep going. I can pause. I can flip back. If there are questions or comments on these two versions. Again, this is concept 1. The big thing is the two-way facility on the south side and bending Medford into Pearl and the raised intersection at Marshall. Big thing with concept 2 is bending Pearl to Medford, raised crosswalk at Marshall, and one-way bike facility at West.
On option 1, in front of the Sarma.
Yeah.
Is that like 2-hour parking or is that like loading zone and stuff?
TBD.
Okay.
We want to hear
Even just walking back from the open house the other day, there was a car stopped in the middle of the road, loading people in.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a pretty good opportunity for something like that. I think we showed a picture in our first meeting of the loading vehicle like parked on the sidewalk there. So yeah, this has parking in front of Sarma.
Justin, can you talk about the bike lane going west in this option? Or is the city extending all the way to Medford and all the way up? Or do they need to cross?
Yeah, if you recall the temporary connection we did when the path is still closed. So there's a two-way bike lane on School Street.
all the way to
from
school.
Highland to Medford. And there's a 2-lane bike lane here. It's not gonna be through this project, but we're gonna connect. Yeah. Because it would be a pretty awkward gap between
Yeah.
two-way bike facilities. And that's just a quick build that we're gonna tie into. I don't know the exact time. But it's pretty soon.
Definitely. Slightly adjacent to that, is there a plan to connect Highland down to that two-way bike facility? Because I'm constantly biking down from the previous location of this meeting down School Street to get back home.
I don't know. Yeah, I am not positive that is included as a part of that. We're definitely aware that's been requested. And it is in the bike network plan. It's in like the group of by 2030 facilities. So soon, I don't know exactly how soon. I don't know if it's going to be with this.
Sorry, one more thing is looking at the McGrath thing, and the current McGrath design was closing off that street that would have been used to connect to the neighborhood. Yeah. Because it looks like that in this diagram here.
Yeah. Not 100% sure. Is that
Seems like that's just too often.
Oh yes, and Aldridge. Yeah, is that where is that presentation?
It's the McGrath presentation.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was the area they were still working on, but yeah. So that, I mean, potentially is an opportunity to make this connection a little bit better. It's a very short section. It is on the ground. There's a green bike lane there. Because of all the curb cuts, there's no house on that section.
For option 1, how would the bikes manage some of those turns? It looks like it might, like if someone's trying to get into the contraflow bike lane on Marshall Street, where are they expected to turn?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, at least as it's laid out right now, I would find that very confusing.
Yeah.
And something I definitely like about this plan versus the option 2, the sidewalks on the north side are much more aligned with the crosswalks. Sorry, the crosswalks are more aligned with the sidewalks. So I think that's a nice feature of this plan.
Yes. I think we definitely be not open. We would like to hear how folks think that can be marked or signed. We don't have the space for like a left turn cutout. We're really tight on space, like down to the inches really. So it's unfortunately would be kind of like, you know, a left turn when you're in a car, someone behind you might have to wait. You have to wait for it to happen. There could be markings to make that more clear that folks will be crossing there. Don't think we have space for. What we try to do sometimes is a little cutout. This is really 2 4-foot bike lanes. It's quite tight.
And just a general question, is the city definitely one plan or another? It could be a combination somehow.
Could be a combination. Yeah, definitely could be a combination.
Because there's aspects of either that seem interesting.
Okay, so next time we'll look at option 2. And then, so we're moving down the other side of Skilton to Jasper Street. That's Walnut in the middle. So back to option 1, that 2-way bike lane has just ended at the first Skilton Ave to connect with the neighborway. The eastbound bike facility continues down the street. Similarly, we've got curb extensions to prevent parking too close to the intersection. On the north side where there's parking, we have raised crosswalks across the non-signalized side streets. At Walnut Street, the 2 curb extensions on the north side, one of them is a bus stop, and one of them is in front of there's a laundromat there, a convenience store. Allows us to put some parking near the laundromat convenience store. You know, the trade-off there is going the other way. The bus stop and the bike lane is shared, so there's not quite enough space to do a flowing bus stop. We have those curb extensions on the north side, and then, you know, similarly again. So we're really just switching the bike lane and parking. Bike is now the north going west, parking is on the south side. We haven't moved both curb extensions to the south side. There's still one on each side, so the intersection's a little offset. We have enough room to do the floating bus stop heading west, and then the other way it's in lane bus stop. And there's the clear corners markings. I don't know if I mentioned that previously, but we have that on all the side streets, that no parking too close to the intersection. I guess the one thing to note is just overall, there are more side streets on the north side. So there's a little bit more of like an up and down dynamic when you're biking. We tried very hard to try to keep that bike lane raised, but we just don't have the width to keep it raised across the side street. So it does go down to street level at every side street. Any questions before we move on?
Recording in progress.
And again, here's option one, bike lane on the south side, heading east towards McGrath, and parking on the north side. And then again, option two. And we can, of course, come back to any sections. So last section towards McGrath, Jasper to McGrath. So option one, again, much of the same. Bike lane heading towards McGrath, parking on the other side. We have the sort of Wigglesworth Jasper raised crosswalk between them. That's the existing crosswalk that's there today. It's not ADA accessible. And then the last bus stop before McGrath, heading east, is again shared with the bike lane. And then on the other side, we're able to move that a little bit further away from the intersection, making it an in-lane stop. It does allow us to add some parking that doesn't exist today. Right. I think today there's no parking along that block. And then our limit of work is just shy of McGrath Boulevard. And option two, concept two, apologies. This is the section where the bike route that we've connected Walnut and Gilman is coming up Jasper, so now there's a bike facility on both sides of the street. There's no parking on either side, just along this section, and both of the bus stops are shared, again, because there's just not space. One minor thing is, I remember from our walk, you guys pointed out, we saw that the sidewalk's like narrow, about 50 feet before McGrath. They kind of like bend in across the sidewalk, so we bumped them out. So it doesn't look like a bump out, but there's more of a continuous 8-foot for the whole length. It doesn't get super narrow right there in McGrath. And there'll be space for trees and things like that. We're only showing existing trees in this map, so our city arborist, our PSF team is going to help suggest new tree locations. Folks can also suggest new tree locations. And I promise I'll stop talking soon, but I talked at the beginning about like what was the same. So this is like a summary of the differences between 1 and 2. Concept 1 is the one-way eastbound bike lane. Concept 2 is the one-way westbound bike lane. They're relying on some nearby streets in 2 different directions to complete that loop and provide around in both directions. Parking switches side at Walnut Street, the curb extensions are configured a little bit different. At Marshall Street, raised intersection versus raised crosswalks. And then at Medford Street, we're showing Medford bending into Pearl or Pearl bending into Medford. And like you mentioned, Preston, there's opportunity to pick and choose the next version from the lists from both sides of this list. We have a few events coming up. I'm happy to pause and answer any questions or go back to anything from before.
Justin, I just want to raise one comment from Eiley in the chat, which is on the last segment, closest to McGrath, which is, can this project include changes to the lanes or signaling at McGrath, or is that out of scope? Which it seems like it is, but she provides additional context that might be worth considering here. Right now, if you were on Pearl driving eastbound, there is a left and straight lane and a right turn only lane. To increase connectivity between East Somerville and the rest, sorry, I lost it. To increase connectivity between East Somerville and the rest of Somerville, I think we should try to prioritize cross traffic, automotive and pedestrian both, versus assuming everyone in a car at that intersection will be trying to get onto McGrath to go somewhere else. Right now, there are constant rights on red from Pearl onto southbound McGrath, and they are a problem for pedestrian safety.
So both of our designs propose a single lane at McGrath. It's a state highway controlled intersection, so we don't have control over the signaling. We can propose changes, but we don't have control over that. It's not really within the scope of our project to do a new traffic signal design. We think that we can eliminate the right turn lane without making major changes. And that's what we propose here. We are going to have to talk to the state about that. That's, I think, a lighter lift, and agree. I live in the area, and the right turns on red are continuous. So we're proposing a single lane. I think that answered all parts of that. Yeah.
There is a thank you in the chat, so I agree.
A question that kind of ties into this: what are the current prospects of making a pedestrianized area on Bedford Street?
Yeah. The Gilman Square design basically caused the 60%. It's not anywhere in the city's capital plan right now. So I think it's more of a vision than a project at this point. And this project definitely will not be. It is a state-controlled bridge, so we'd have to work with MassDOT to close it. And yeah, the design is on hold.
Okay, just thinking about the direction of that intersection.
Yeah. So that concept one, the pedestrianization, if we were able to close the bridge, it makes things a little easier because we've already done the intersection configuration. If we were to go with concept 2 at Medford, then we'd be reconstructed to do what was in the Gilman Square design. So in some ways, this is like, are we continuing to move in that direction, or are we, taking a U-turn and doing something else in this?
So Justin, when you mentioned the Stilton Avenue used for the bikes, are you also thinking that this will extend into Gilman Street?
Yes.
So it's correct. So it comes from that street.
Yeah. So the idea is to use the existing neighborway. Aldrich Street is not a part of that neighborway. I think we recognize that for a lot of folks, like, they would just continue like Gilman Street. I think there's this idea, like, if we're providing a route for the whole direction, an alternative street, we need to get back where we started. So we have the Aldrich and McGrath route because we want folks who, let's say they live on the corner of Dana, right? They want to have access to the full route. For a lot of destinations, it may make more sense to continue on Gilman Street. This is the existing neighborway. It's only the Aldrich Street and that short section of McGrath that are not, signed and have the treatments and so on.
Because the interesting component on this design is that since the bikes are going down or on the south side, then on the north side of the street, on the same concept, you have more bump outs. And at least what we saw on the walk is that there's a lot of speeding in that section coming from McGrath into Somerville. Is the hope that those bump outs would also help reduce the speed of the cars? Because the other one is a straight shot, right? It's much easier to speed on the second concept.
I think regardless of the concept, it's going to feel a lot more narrow. At those bump outs, the cars go get this 20-something feet. If you're more concerned about folks coming from McGrath, maybe it feels a little narrower because the bump outs are on their side, the parking probably a little easier to drive more quickly next to a very straight bike lane than it is like a bunch of parked cars, people getting out of that and all that. So yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, the curb extensions into Pearl are all where the parking is. So they're all opposite bikes.
For that Skilton Ave bike connection, is there any potential that like it can happen regardless of which plan? There could be like a continuation through Gilman up to Pearl and then to Medford? Because the other direction in concept 2 is a lot of hill.
Yeah. That is an existing neighborhood, not the Aldrich piece, not the McGrath piece, but Gilman Street, Ed Leathers Park, Skilton Ave. There are signs that the Skilton piece could probably use a little more pavement markings and things like that. It's one of our older generation ones, so it doesn't have the purple and the new signs and the newer intersection treatments. But it does have like the contraflow treatments for bikes on both ends of Gilman. It has the old style signs, which were our first generation signs. So we're thinking about if there's an opportunity to maybe get the purple signs out there, do some more. The idea is that like it's not part of the Complete Streets project, but we work to implement the full bike route with this project.
Yeah, I didn't realize you could go through Ed Leather Park.
Yeah, it's a pretty narrow 5-foot path right now. There's a crosswalk to get in there with the curb cut on the Gilman side. There's not a crosswalk on the Skilton Ave side, which is a little awkward. We're looking to see if we can improve that. Wouldn't anticipate any changes in the park itself, but like we to make a connection smoother if we're going that direction. And then the other one, the one that sort of weaves a little bit more. The intent, just like we talked about the first community meeting, would be Medford Street would be upgraded to a quick build protected bike lane. And Jasper Street would become part of the neighborway. The other streets on there are already bike facilities.
For concept 1, what improvements will be made at the park? Because it's like there's not really a curb cut there again if you're going down. So
if you're going down Gilman?
Or like going down, is that still?
Yes, there is a curb cut on the Walnut side. It's the crosswalk, right? There's not one on the Skilton side, and I can't make any promises tonight, but we're hoping, trying to improve it.
But as far as like the curb cut, looking at the street view, and I've gone through there before, and there's like a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
To the curb. Right?
There's not a curb cut on that side. Right. Yeah, there is a curb cut on the Walnut side.
And they'll be using the existing like path before.
Yeah.
So on concept 1, are the funds for the red segment included in this project, or is it going to be like an extra thing?
It's not a part of the Complete Streets project, but it would be a quick low project that we're building within the day. So can't promise the time it will be perfect, but the intent would be it's going to be implemented together. And once we settle on a design direction, we'll really be planning that piece. I think there's still space to suggest alternatives. We thought through a large number of options and think that these are the only ones that are workable. The Medford piece involves McGrath and just space constraints. We would have to do sort of lane diets on the very end of Medford and on McGrath itself. I just did not think that was feasible. The state is planning, they are doing those lane diets in the McGrath Boulevard. They want to wait for that to implement this project. And also these are both they're a little flatter, they're a little more direct. They're about the same length that Medford one's much longer.
A question on the floating bus stops. Since there's a potential that that bus goes away eventually, are they like big enough that like maybe there's room for putting like benches or blue bikes or bike racks? Okay. Yeah.
Benches, bike racks for sure. Could be a little tight for blue bikes. if that wasn't there, we probably could do it. Yes, yeah, or, you know, planting areas, things like that. Because of the sort of year round aid, we're not going to do things like, you know, shelters, things like that. Benches are on the table though with the current project. Thank you. Yeah.
Just want to throw in my 2 cents on the concepts. I think I personally prefer concept 1 slightly over concept 2, especially for the treatment at Medford Street. Because it seemed like a lot of the speeding cars were coming from Medford Street, like traveling westbound onto Pearl Street. And to me, it makes more sense that like having a slightly curved end to that street with like a crosswalk that they must stop at would encourage additional stopping behavior rather than just giving them a throughput as they have today. That said, in the chat, Eiley was raising a different interpretation of that concept where there might be more visibility for people who are walking, traveling eastbound on Pearl Street to like see the cars that are coming from Medford Street. So just wanted to recognize that difference there. And then I also like concept 1 because it minimizes conflict between people biking and walking on the north side of Pearl Street, because concept 2 has the bike lane kind of running through the floating bus stops, whereas concept 1 does not. So it seems like there's a little bit more protection for people walking in that capacity. Curious if other folks have strong feelings on one concept over the other, or if folks still want like more time to take this design in and maybe make specific recommendations at a later date.
I guess the only question that I would raise is like, are we sure the speeding happens in Medford, not Pearl? Because it's because initially I was thinking concept 1 is great across the entire section except for the intersection, because that curve there, the cars just go straight up and like they don't stop anywhere, and there is a crosswalk right there. So I'm not sure if the intersection is the best we can get there.
Can you describe which direction you're concerned?
Sorry, going west. So I think when we did the walk, all of the cars speeding were always on the west side, going west. And they particularly like this curve going up. And I don't know, there is a raised intersection there that may increase some of the speed there. So I think that's the only question I have. Like we know where the speeding is happening, because I don't remember seeing a lot from Medford. Medford is the opposite side, right? Like if they go east, then they speed on that side.
Yeah, we have. I don't have the data, but so we've done speed studies on all streets. Medford is generally faster. We've added speed humps. Even after that last speed hump, you're still going down the hill. It was actually alarmingly fast before we added speed humps. It's like over 30 miles an hour. So it's much improved now. They're quite aggressive speed humps. I don't think we can say for certain which is worse. We added speed humps at Medford, and then we're proposing, there's consistent race stuff here on either end. So both directions will have the traffic coming.
Yeah.
But you're correct that heading west on Pearl, the street's much more narrow, but the sort of rounding that corner, that's essentially the same curve line as today. And one of the things we worked through is like where exactly to put that crosswalk on Medford. Try to get the traffic coming. You do have to slow down going around the corner.
No.
Yeah. they don't have stop control, right? So they think about this. This on this side.
I've mentioned this before, but the angle of the ramp up to those raised crosswalks, I've seen a lot of the ones are way too shallow and people just go still full speed. On School Street, there's I forget what the cross street is, but there's a raised intersection. Cars don't slow down at all.
Yeah, it's like not far from Maple, like you remember the exact one.
Yeah, but it's like barely, it's like
Broadway Medford is
10
the
feet.
or raised intersection.
Yeah, it's like 10 feet long and like 3 inches up, right? So it's like cars don't even notice it. But the one at the community path on Cedar Street is much more abrupt, and that forces cars to slow down more.
Yeah. The good news is this is not a major arterial street, so I think there's opportunity for us for no matter what design we choose to push for as steep as possible. That's one of the reasons we didn't go for that big raised area is to like we've heard this from PTAC, like have the up and down close to each other. That's also why at Marshall, like we've tried to make that as small as possible, maybe even be able to make it a little bit smaller. Just pushing, even though it's a raised intersection, like we can try to make it as compact as possible. Sometimes we can't solve the problem if there are grading issues. Like for example, coming down Bedford Street, regardless of what we do, there's going to be challenges. In this option, challenges with that raised crosswalk across Bedford, and in this option, there could be similar challenges anytime we're crossing Bedford close to a hill, because the street's coming down, we're trying to go back up, but we're also trying to go down overall. We'll certainly push as hard as we can, but it is just, unfortunately, physics.
For the Marshall Street, in the direction of Marshall Street on Plan 1, there's 2 crosswalks. This is relating to how the topography would go for, is it just the same level all the way through the bike lane? Is that at the same level as the sidewalk, or is that lower than the sidewalk?
The bike lane is at sidewalk level.
Okay.
So that is level for the bike facility there. Again, this is a concept, so it's not fully engineered, and that can change. We can take feedback on that. I think that's the intent of what's shown. It's just level at sidewalk level.
Realizing that we are short on time, I just want to ask one more question. Can you go back to the proposed concept 2, Kate? So thinking about again cars traveling west on Medford Street. I know you mentioned some speed humps, and I think I didn't quite register it, but are there any traffic calming measures besides the raised crosswalk itself that crosses Medford Street proposed here, like before a car comes across the raised crossing, or is it still like they'll fly down Medford Street and then hit that raised crosswalk, and that'll be kind of their first sign that pedestrians are about?
There's an existing speed hump. I believe it's towards the bottom of the screen. I don't think it's all the way at the very bottom of the screen, but it's maybe after the word street in Medford Street. It's not shown in this aerial. I think that would be the closest one coming down the hill. I don't think there's room to do another one. I think there certainly we would take feedback on things like having a speed hump between crosswalks or things like that within the project limits. We're not showing any right now, but that's something that could be proposed. This 3 would be eligible to have them. But the existing speed hump, I think, is the closest one coming down the hill.
I was curious with the 2-way bike lane on Medford Street. Do we know how many people are using the contraflow direction right now? Because I imagine with the community path direction open again, it might not be as many.
I don't think we know how many. Well, the connection is not there today.
Oh, so it's it's gone.
It was just wasn't path is connected. I think we had on Pearl Street like around 90 or 100 bikes per day in each direction. Or no, sorry, total. Don't know if all of those were going on Medford, but just where we collected data. But yeah, the two-way facility was in place when the community path opened, but this section between school and it's not our school in Medford, it's not the high school is still under construction.
Just trying to think of where that where that would put people, like what the long-term use might be.
Yeah, it's really, I think it's kind of a community path feeder route, right? Because it wouldn't continue on Medford, it would wrap up school, so.
Maybe divert traffic away from the Gilman stop.
Potentially, yeah, getting to Highland, things like that.
Kate and Justin, what is the kind of deadline or ideal last moment that we would give you like definitive feedback on this project?
The next committee meeting is at the tail end of our sort of outreach window. It's perfectly fine to make a final call or whatever form happen at that meeting. And we are proposing something here that's not consistent with the bike network plan, so it would be good for the community to weigh in one way or the other. But yes, I think it's perfectly fine to take this up at the next meeting. Beyond that, we're being openly.
Okay, just because it seems like folks are taking time to digest the designs, which I think is extremely fair. There's a lot to take in. So maybe we can plan to do a slightly shorter agenda item on this project again with the goal of making a committee recommendation on concept 1 or 2 or a combination of them. But for the time being, thank you all so much for coming to yet another PTAC meeting. I will get the McGrath letter sent tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow, and we'll plan to discuss this project again. I'll just put in a plug that I'm sorry, did you want to say something, Justin?
Could we check in quickly on the meeting date for the next meeting?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. So we have a few options for our next meeting date. Right now it is scheduled for June 12th, which is a week earlier than we had originally scheduled it because our original meeting was on the 19th, which is Juneteenth, so it's a holiday. But we don't have a room available on the 12th. So we could either do a fully virtual meeting on the 12th, which is a Thursday, or we could reschedule to the 17th, June 17th, which is a Tuesday. And if we did that one, then we would have the central branch of the public library for that meeting. I mean, it would still be a hybrid meeting, but we would have the in-person option. So do folks prefer a virtual only meeting on June 12th or a hybrid meeting on June 17th?
I would prefer the 12th, but I'm just 1%. So.
I also would prefer the 12th.
Anyone who would prefer the 17th? Okay.
You would not make it on the 12th? Sorry, go ahead.
Great. Then I think we should do the 12th so that folks can join, or that the most folks can join. It'll just be a virtual meeting, which is fine. Does that get you what you need, Justin?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you.
Can I just plug a little walk out at Elm Street this Monday?
Yes.
So at 5 p.m. Meeting at the West Branch of the library. I'm just walking just 2 blocks of Elm Street that are potentially, maybe hypothetically in my dreams, pedestrianized one day, and seeing what maybe we can do in the short term to improve that. Yes. I've got little flyers for anybody here. Sorry for the virtual links.
Thank you for organizing that, Joel.
Thank you for the materials that you sent. It's really helpful.
I'm so glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Anything else before we finally leave? All right, thank you, everybody. See you next month.
Yeah.
Thank you.